Hi, my name is Nick Weiss. I am the founder and managing attorney of Weiss Law, with offices in South Euclid and Elyria, practicing in real estate, family law, and estate planning and administration. Today, I want to talk about a difficult decision that we run into when we're doing estate planning. Your basic estate planning, any part of estate planning, will include a last will and testament. That's if you are sure you have all your beneficiaries set. That's if you're sure your transfer and death designations. That's if you're sure that you're not going to need an estate because you've already handled all that stuff. People are wrong. They're wrong a lot. And there's no reason to take the risk there of not putting a will together and not putting an executor together. So even if you have taken that advanced planning or not, choosing the person who is going to be distributing your assets after death is very, very, very important. Choosing who that person is, that we call an executor in Ohio, if they are nominated in a will, is picking a person to do a job. And it's not an easy job either. The executor is the person who will be getting all of your assets together upon death, finding all of your beneficiaries, whether they're named or unnamed, getting consents out to those beneficiaries, opening the estate with the probate court, filing inventories with the court, dispersing assets, paying bills, paying off debts, maintaining the assets, and finally closing the estate. Your average estate experience lasts a year. That is a year where a person that you have nominated is responsible almost totally for taking your assets and getting them to the people that you want. Okay. So that person that you nominate does not necessarily need to be someone who is super financially literate, but it helps. Someone who is familiar with bank accounts, someone who's familiar with retirement accounts, someone who's familiar with your assets. When you're doing that, that's a good person to name. Many people will name their spouses or their children or someone they trust for something like that. Sometimes, when we talk about this in another video, you nominate someone who's unrelated to you entirely. You have the option of nominating a financial institution or an attorney who can serve as that role as executor. And whoever you nominate, the most important thing is trust. Trust in that person. There are many, many, many nice people who I like they are friends of mine. And I would not necessarily trust them to handle my estate, right? This is not a likability contest. This is about who is the most responsible person that you know, that you trust, that you can pick for the job. If you think it's way too big for someone, co-executors are always an option. You can put two people on and have them make those choices, make those distributions. But you need someone who is trustworthy, who is organized, who is available, who is responsible, and someone who can be impartial. Someone who is going to take your will and do exactly what it says, no matter what your kids say, no matter what your beneficiaries say, no matter what the attorney says. They're going to look at that and say, this is what my husband wanted. This is what my friend wanted, right? And maybe I agree with that, maybe I disagree with that, but I'm going to do what they told me to do. Sometimes it's hard to find a person in your life who can do that. And talking with your attorney to try to figure that out, or even making your attorney your executor, can help to solve those problems. Location. Should the person that you nominate as executor live where you live? So this is a hard question to answer. The legal answer is you can nominate anyone out of the country, and that nomination will take priority. Nominate anyone internationally, nominate them, and that nomination will take priority. That person can serve as executor. As a matter of practicality, that is hard. It is hard for someone out of state, out of country, to act as executor. And that's for a couple of reasons. Banks, dealing with banks, dealing in person with banks is almost always easier than trying to get things done by email, by fax, by phone. So we have relationships with banks around here. We walk in and do things, and that gets things done a lot faster than it otherwise would. Retirements, being able to be nearby, to handle those things, big advantage. Dealing with funerals and costs and cremation, right? Those are all things that mostly have to be handled locally. There's an advantage to having your executor be someone local. And finally, there's the courts themselves. Even though probate courts are getting better at accepting electronic signatures and accepting electronically filed documents, the gold standard for estate administration is still wet ink signatures, in-person filings. These are the safest, most efficient things that you can do when you're administering the estate to ensure that the court is going to approve your filings, move the case along, get your assets distributed. Every single one of those things is easier if you have someone in state, and even better in the same county where you're going to be administering the estate. Can the executor be one of the beneficiaries? And the answer is yes. You can name an executor who is also a beneficiary. There's not an inherent conflict of interest there in simply naming a person who's going to administer the estate, act as fiduciary, as someone who is also going to benefit from the estate. There are some best practices there. So, for example, when we are executing wills, we really try to have people who would be beneficiaries under the will not act as a witness to that will, because that can be a conflict of interest when we're doing that, when we're trying to ensure the authenticity of that will. But there's nothing inherently wrong with naming an executor and a beneficiary as the same person. Do executors get paid? And the answer is yes. They are typically paid as a percentage of the total assets in the estate. And that's to recognize that being the executor is a job, and a hard job. And a lot of people don't want to do it, even if they are named in the will as executor. And so the court allows for some compensation to the executor for doing this job. You can set compensation differently in your will if you want to. You can ask for the executor to waive compensation. I really don't think that's a good idea, because you need someone to actually do it, and it's hard work. But an executor can be compensated through the estate for the work they're doing. Compensation for an executor is set by statute and set by local rules at the probate court. Right? And so that's your baseline for executor compensation. You can change that in your will. You can increase it or decrease it. But I often don't recommend people do that. There's a reason that we have this as a percentage basis. That's what the court is looking for, what they're used to. Rocking the boat by playing with executor compensation often doesn't benefit anyone. And so going on your normal statutory percentage is really best practice. So a rough estimate for Cuyahoga County, and this depends on the type of asset that they are distributing and how hard it is to distribute, is 1 to 3% of the total estate value. Things that need to be liquidated, like a house, if we are not doing direct transfer to beneficiaries, but instead we have to go sell it, right? That's going to be higher. That's going to be at your 3%, 3.5% of the total percentage when we are calculating executor and attending compensation. Things that are easy to distribute, like a bank account, that's going to be just a 1% of the total amount that's in the bank account, right? It's pretty easy. You get access to the bank account, put it in the estate checking account, and then write some checks, right? So it depends on the asset. More complicated estates, harder assets to distribute, it's going to be more cost, both on the executive level and the attorney level. If you need more assistance with this, finding an executor, making those decisions, please feel free to give our office a call, and we're happy to help.